Welcome to the Self-Aware Solopreneur podcast. I am so excited to have you listen in because this podcast is for people who are transitioning careers in their 9 to 5 or maybe stepping into leadership and trying to figure out who they are along the way. We will also have a lineup of industry guest experts who are contributing to making significant change in other people's lives, so you can create a path to living life on your terms. Welcome to the Self-Aware Solopreneur podcast. I'm your host, Humaira. Today, I am bringing on a guest who I've been following for quite a long time on LinkedIn. He finally came onto my show, and I'm super excited. One of the things that I love about this guest is, regardless of the industry or niche, he's completely showing up as who he is. And that is refreshing to see on LinkedIn. Before I introduce, I have a favorite quote I was stalking him a little bit. If you're unwilling to navigate the mainstream, you're destined to stagnate in the backwater. Whew, man, I had to grab it, and he might not even remember it, but I had to bring it up. His name is Tyler Schmoker. What's up, Tyler? How's it going?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think that probably it was more the delay was on you saying yes for me trying to get onto your awesome podcast than me being hard to get. But in any case, we're here now and we're doing the deal. So I'm really excited to geek out. We can talk a little bit about LinkedIn, and also we can talk a bit about the importance of character development and storylines to make professionals more relatable within the LinkedIn space and get away from some of the boring nonsense with infomercials, right? So I'm really looking forward to digging in today.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate what you just said, that we're going to debunk some of those myths and nonsense and building character. I love that. Building character. And I think a lot of the times we forget that whatever we're putting out there, it says a lot about who you are. So why not make it intentional? Why not make it to be what you want it to be? So
Right.
let me tell the listeners a little bit about who you are. But one of the things that strikes me as a person, that you are this farm kid who is also a professional soldier, adventurer, holistic deep thinker who's traveled a diverse path. And your worldview is panoramic. Deconstructing complexity into relatable and solvable elements is your passion. You're also someone who is a retired Army combat armed senior non-commissioned officer and strategic projects that you've led as a consultant to Fortune 500s. You worked in the corporate security industry, if I'm not mistaken, for over 20 years. You're also an avid alpine climber and endurance athlete. So, our man in Minnesota, my goodness.
I do a lot of stuff. I dabble in a lot of things. I think Tim Ferriss, who has a small podcast out there, I think he's referred to himself as a professional dabbler and a professional dilettante, where he tries a lot of stuff and he's never the best at any of it, but he's able to try a lot of different things. So I would put myself into that same category. It's like I came from nothing, but I've always endeavored to be a bit of a professional dilettante and try as many things as I can. And in the process of working in the military, and then as a paramilitary, and then in corporate security, and then in working with like Fortune 500 consultancies, I just picked up a lot of different best practices, hacks, tips, tricks, all these other things that people love to talk about. So I picked a lot of that stuff up from a lot of different industries and a lot of different organizations. So the roles that I've been in, I've had the opportunity to see behind the curtain of some of the biggest companies in the world that a lot of people have heard of and buy their products and services and all those things. And so
Sure.
it's really just taking the best aspects of all these different influences throughout my life and trying to channel them for my audience in ways that are digestible and hopefully
Right.
Fun. Rules be damned.
Yeah. What's really interesting is that whenever I think of the term security or network or these high technical terms, right? I'm thinking this guy who's in the suit and sitting at the lobby with a leather briefcase and ready to shake his hands with, okay, don't talk to me unless you are this
Mhm.
high end I don't know. But here you are on LinkedIn. You're letting your hair down and you're just having fun. So tell me this transition that you found in your character building. Like, how did you land there?
About 2.5, pushing 3 years ago, I was at a very
Mhm.
large, prominent global security firm that
Mhm.
was in the midst of being acquired by another company. Like a lot of people, I figured it's time to brush up resumes, do all these other things, and start to clean up your LinkedIn. And if you're not going to be retained, or if you decide that the setup isn't quite what you wanted and you want to look elsewhere to do other things, then you have it set up for that. I started paying attention to LinkedIn then about 3 years ago, and I was
Mm,
looking specific within my industry to primarily private security, corporate security industry, which I had a decent amount of connections in, maybe about 2,000 connections at the time. And then
mhm,
also like military and some of those kind of overlapping industries where I had an interest. And I
mhm,
saw a gap. So within the corporate security industry, I joke about this. There are about 1 million people just in the US alone who are working in the security and public safety field. And that's not even counting police and other stuff, just security people, private security people. I joke that there's about 5 people who actually post regularly on LinkedIn. And of that, the content is pretty fixed to here's this article from Security Magazine, which is a great publication, by the way, but it's the same old dull. Here's my one line quip and then read this thing. It's that's not really yours. And I can't remember who said it. I want to say it's possibly Lisa McGuire, but miscrediting it. I apologize in advance, but I was on her podcast and
mhm,
she and I think that it was her that referred to you
mhm.
should be looking to develop brand and put forth content that can't be Googled, right? That's how you build an audience. Like I can post this article from industry magazine to look smart to my peers, or I could post some weird stuff that maybe gets a chuckle out of people and maybe has a leadership mantra in there. And it's usually going to be a picture of my backyard or some variation of that. So I
Right.
decided to go the latter. And so when I built up the courage to start posting on LinkedIn, I initially tried to do the things that I thought were within the box, but pushing the limits a little bit, but it didn't work very well. So I made a complete change in how I approach content. And I decided I'm a very versed person in the security industry. I know what I'm talking about. I can sit in any meeting with any room, but no one really knows who I am because I didn't do a great job of marketing. I always focused on the principal work and that'll speak to itself. And it does to an extent. But then when you're starting to get to the director, VP, senior VP level, if you're not networking, you're not moving. That's the reality of the situation. So I had about 10 years of time that I need to make up for my own la lack of prioritizing networking. And I thought LinkedIn was the perfect place to do that. A lot of industries talk about you want open-ended systems. There are no truly open-ended systems, blah, 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 blah. And they talk about that a lot in the security industry, but it's like we have a fully open-ended system right now that's integrated into every Fortune 500 company and every smaller company in the world, where every mid-manager to decision maker in business and industry is
Mhm.
on it, and it's called LinkedIn. 930 million members, but we're coming on here and we're not really developing characters and we're not doing things that are drawing interest to what it is that we're doing. So I decided to start focusing a bit more on what are like general content creators and creatives on the platform doing? And, I'm coming into this as a 40-year-old guy, not really being a social media guy before. I'm just starting to take stuff in and figure stuff out. And I
Right.
decided, well, if I want to be here for the long haul, which 3 years now and posting regularly is like dog years, because I've seen a lot of people come, blow up, tell their story, run out of stuff to talk about, lose direction, and they're gone in 90 days. So it's if I'm going to stay here long term and make this a real part of potentially a future selling channel or consultancy or just leveraging it for my existing company or whatever, then I need to be able to talk about things I want to talk about because otherwise it's not going to work if you're talking about stuff that you hate every day. So I started gleaning in those creative components, added my flair. You're going to see a lot of pictures of my wood pile. So if you don't like wood pile content, don't follow me. It's okay. But I started adding those things, but then I could start to add in elements of professional things that I thought were beneficial. So it's not like Tyler's just a fun guy and let's see what he has to say today and haha, and then I move on. It's I can do that. I can add some pop culture references. I can incorporate some humor, but then also
Mhm.
add some poignant stuff from 20 plus years of leading people in some really rough places and having some tough professional experiences and starting to instill some of those lessons I've learned in resiliency and really putting myself out on the edge professionally for a lot of years and even in my hobbies, climbing big mountains, etc. And
Mhm.
so I started to do that. And so now I've started to make a little bit more of a pivot. Humaira, you've probably seen this as well, where I'm starting to incorporate the security stuff back into it a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that.
basically,
Right.
I've made that pivot arc and I did a post about it. None of this is a secret. I'm not hiding anything. But basically, I did a flanking move and then started driving into the side because all of a sudden, 2.5 years later, within the security industry in the US in particular, and even globally, I went from being a guy who no one knew to
Mhm.
who's this weird dude posting weird stuff that no one likes. Now, all of a sudden, I think I'm a top 1500 favicon creator on LinkedIn. And the industry is like, where did this guy come from?
That is.
But the beauty of that then is then it turns from a case, who's this guy who's posting
Mhm.
off script and posting this weird stuff, and he's the weird guy. Can you believe that he's doing it or whatever? But what started to happen is I've started to get acceptance, right? To where I'm seeing more and more folks from the security industry not only viewing my content, but now engaging in it and having fun with the humor and then also contributing to it. And it's opening up their minds as well to some of these methodologies and things that I pull from outside of the industry. They're starting to see this stuff now. And, some of that was years in the making and really a validation where
Mhm.
a couple of weeks back, I went to this large professional conference for security professionals, conference and expo in Dallas. I'm getting recognized walking down the street. I'm getting recognized in hotels. I'm getting recognized in restaurants, the airport, at the conference, but really having an opportunity to start meeting people because I've built rapport beforehand where people come up, hey, Tyler, it's nice to meet you. Well, where do I know you from? LinkedIn. And then we talk about what they've got going on or whatever. And then also because I've started to establish that presence. And if for no other reason, other people who are natives or leveraging multimedia for selling efforts or whatever within the security industry, they're like, hey, if I have this guy on, people are probably going to listen to this episode of my podcast. And then maybe they'll listen to other episodes of the podcast. And for me, it's a benefit too, because it allows
Mhm.
me to leverage another form of media to get my voice out there. And really, I appreciate podcasts like this in particular and hosts that are gracious enough
Mhm.
to have me on because if you see my no capitalized, weird grammar, often odd content, so who is this guy? It's I can actually
Right.
sit and have a normal conversation like a functioning person. So some of those things, it's like I do that for my content specifically. I take a lot of creative license and I equate it to developing concepts. It's like a concept car that's really radical design. And maybe it's not street legal, but eventually you get to the production model. So for me, my own individual page content that I produce is highly conceptual because I'm one, testing ideas, and two, I'm trying to provoke thought because thought leadership doesn't start until it's provoked. And someone has that to be that
That's right.
provocateur. So
Right.
in the security industry, I'm that provocateur. Love me or hate me, it makes you think.
I love that. Holy moly. That's a quote that needs to be said somewhere. Um, okay, so here's something really interesting what you said. While in my line of work, I've worked with founders and people who are just trying to get their business off the ground, or they have been in the business for a while, but they have no footprint, no digital print on social media, right? So, what I'm listening to you and going, "Okay, here's a guy who may not necessarily have a solopreneurship or a full blown business, but you are building this net worth or network, right? And you're doing it before you actually need it, before you even need it. And this is the thing that we've heard many times, that build your network before you need it, not when you're desperate, not when
Mhm.
circumstances change and all of a sudden you go to network and say, oh, okay, please buy my stuff. No one does that. And you don't want to do that in the first place because it's very easy to erode trust on social media platforms,
Right.
especially if you haven't built any sort of rapport or trust, right? So, I what my question, I guess it's not a question, but more of a realization is that, okay, so I've worked with founders who are like, they know it's important. They know that it to be well-rounded. It's not
Mhm.
just being a talking heads or just sharing articles and, oh, employee of the month and things like that, which we see so often.
Here's your certificate, and here's picture of me handing certificate to you. It's like, that's great. That's
Right.
great, and people cheer, but a lot of that content too, I
Mhm.
refer to it as the self-licking ice cream cone, where you see either the company content right from the company, or you see it being shared by someone
Totally.
in the company because they have to. But the thing
Right.
is, when that content reads like an internal company newsletter or memo, you know
Yes.
what it's gonna get? It's going to get people from the company liking it because they have to, and not even all of them. And that's the self-licking ice cream cone. So how do we add storylines to that? Because the reality is people love characters, right? And so you have to have
Absolutely. Right.
characters to where you can pivot storylines. I change my storylines regularly. Like I'll go on periods where I'm talking about emergency preparedness and I spent like a week on it, stuff that we do around the house. And then I might go back and do some LinkedIn tips, or I might make fun of some LinkedIn tips, or I might talk about some geopolitical stuff or whatever. But the thing is,
Mhm.
people might not like all the things because I pivot genres, but they're invested in the character and they know there's going to be some common themes through the character. And it has nothing to do with my ego or I want to be links to famous or anything like that. But to
Sure.
your point, in rounding out this line of discussion,
Mhm.
a LinkedIn presence or a social media presence is a lot like a 401k, and that's been referred to before. And like people talk about, well, Bitcoin or NFTs or whatever. The truth is, there's valuation in what it is that we're doing through LinkedIn because to some extent that's my own intellectual property. And I've established a brand over time. And you can't just switch on tomorrow and do the things that I've done. So, like,
Right.
I was early enough in my industry and doing some radical things that hopefully will normalize it so that people in my industry can be a little bit more candid, right? And then they
Mhm.
have that asset that can go with them. Like, I've changed employers since I've started getting proactive and serious about LinkedIn. And
Mhm.
the thing is, as long as I decide to show up on the platform, that asset goes with me wherever. And I'm by no means a box influencer by LinkedIn standards. I'm a bottom voice in just about everything, I would assume. But within my industry, I still get 20% yields on views every day, right? So I have influence in the industry. And the other thing too is even if you don't need it because you're not selling something at that point, or maybe you don't have a business that you're actively marketing, like
Mhm.
I'm not doing either of those things, but it gives me access. I can, if I DM anyone on LinkedIn in the security industry, they answer it. It's not spam when it comes from me because I'm here every day and because I've established social proof that look, this is stuff that people are listening to it and they're interested in. So even if it's purely intrigue, I'm able to get that access, right? It's the network net worth. It's absolutely true. And LinkedIn's a great way to scale that, especially when you slacked off and didn't do it for 10 years like I did. So I dove into LinkedIn and put
Right.
myself out there and was able to catch up essentially and even bypass in a lot of cases now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us can relate to that, right? I think a lot of their profiles may have been just dormant, like they didn't do anything. They thought it's just a resume piler or a bunch of people talking about jobs and things like that. And now it has changed the last couple of years. If you look at LinkedIn, It's no longer that place where people like you are saying that, hey, guess what? There is a place for every one of us. And it's
Mhm.
you to decide what kind of place you want it to be. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? And
Mhm.
if that place means here we are here 24/7, it's business, no friend talk or no friend zoning. We're just going to do business, so be it. And there's this other side where you also can have both. You can have connection, relationship, and run a business, which is fine too. So I feel like you've given that you made that environment, hopefully in the security industry, that it's permissible to be both. If you
Mhm.
wanted to do that, go ahead and do it. But I'm curious, now let's talk a little bit about the the nonsense part, okay? The LinkedIn nonsense part where you like your templates, you've got people that are not necessarily boxing you in, but these are best practices, right?
Mhm.
Now, if I let's face it, you and I both know if I sit here and talk about LinkedIn, the platform's going to love it. Talk about it all day. I could very well offer ghostwriting services. Not that there's anything wrong with those. We're just exploring this topic. The question that I have is if LinkedIn somehow goes away, then what are we left with? What are we going to talk about? And that's always something kind of triggers my mind, right? I'm always interested and curious. Okay, if you didn't if you didn't do LinkedIn services, what else would you do? What would be your defining what would be the vision, right? And I think those are the kind of people that gravitates me,
Mhm.
the ones that are taking risks around not just LinkedIn, but also seeing where it can go and not necessarily putting yourself in a box or saying that this is the niche that I have to stuck with for the rest of my life. Let's face it, we're changing, we're molding, and we're evolving as human beings, right? What's your take on that?
So when I decided, early on after, and I bombed for a long time, I was not a 30-day superstar or a 90-day superstar, the guy that, hey, look, after 6 months, I have 8 million followers and this and that. That wasn't me. And in fact, I still grind it out every day. So I probably don't have the winning formula for LinkedIn, but I certainly have developed a longevity formula that works for me. So, and one of the examples that I looked at when I decided, look, I'm just going to start doing some stuff that I want to do if I'm going to be here. Otherwise, I'm going to quit like a lot of people do or get too nervous about pushing some limits and provoking some thought. But I look to the Joe Rogan example. We were talking a little bit about this deal
Mhm.
with Spotify and how it opened up video before the call. But if you look at Rogan stuff, you look at the diversity of characters that he has on his podcast every day. It's just not there are certainly some genres that he's more interested in or than others, but he has a variety of different types of guests and they talk about a lot of different subject matter. So he might get on a scientist, but they may end up joking about comedy or something else. So I just really like that variety. And people look at it now and in the podcasting world, Rogan is the man. He's the king,
Like,
but bar
yeah.
none, period, end of story. But he started a long time ago. And he started when he wasn't
Oh,
as
he's been doing that
famous.
for years. Yeah.
And so it took a long time to develop an audience that wasn't like Joe Rogan is the car guy or the comedy guy. He's just a guy who's doing whatever he wants. So that kind of character development and in particular, um, building an audience around a unique character, it takes more time because it's not an outside the box concept where I can come on and post, here are my 3 tips for today on how to maximize your LinkedIn and, do this and make $1 million and sell the dream. And people are going to love that because a lot of people are new and they're tanking on the platform and they're nervous about what they're doing and they don't know what to do. So when you see posts it's 3 lines and 4 carousels of how to do these things. Yes, there's a need for it and good on them for doing what they've done with those things. I won't do a carousel. I don't have enough time, but
You could borrow my template, Tyler.
you're capitalizing though, you're capitalizing on an audience who's wanting the dream. It's because I'm on LinkedIn and I feel like an idiot right now and I suck at it. So yeah, I like this post because you said I can do this too, as opposed to really developing your own character around yourself. And for me, knowing
Mhm.
that I don't have a lot of time, I specifically format my content that way. Like the capitalizations and the dots and some of this other stuff, I do it for specific reasons because 99% of my content, I just crank it out from my phone. Like I'm not sitting and planning a whole lot. I might schedule stuff in the calendar, but it's a little bit of an efficiency. So my audience even knows there might be some typos in there. Likely stuff's not going to be capitalized, and I may have some fun with words. So those are just different things that I do too that aren't textbook. And I'm sure the LinkedIn monitors probably don't like it either, but I know that it's what works for me for longevity. So the people who stick with me now know that they're going to get some Tylerisms and they might be surprised day to day what comes through the content. They're just not going to get an extension of the 7 tips from yesterday and the 3 extreme tips from today on how to become a LinkedIn superstar just like me. And really, at the end of the day, I'm here because I want to be here and I want to project my voice and my knowledge out into the industry to establish access, to establish strong connections. And I just didn't want to be here pulling the LinkedIn lever because if I'm just here saying, do these things and get better at LinkedIn, I'm no longer an artist on the platform. I'm pulling a lever on the machine. And maybe it makes me famous because I give LinkedIn tips, but it's like, if the platform goes away, you're nothing. I'm not obsolete without the platform. I go on doing exactly the same things that I did before I was here. I probably have to find a new platform for reach, but it'll be the same thing. I just start over.
You know what I absolutely appreciate what you just said, that you're here because you want to be here. It's not because
Mhm.
you have to be here,
Right.
right? As so many people look at it this way, that I have to build my brand. I have
Mhm.
to get out there. I have to build a presence. And it's a completely different mindset when you shift to no, it's because I want to be part of the conversation,
Right.
whatever that conversation and the security that may people need to hear about it,
Mhm.
right? This is great. Thank you so much for walking us through this wild journey of yours. I know we can talk about for 3 hours, just talking about LinkedIn and all sorts of things. So tell me a little bit about someone like you who's been this crazy adventures and gone on these. I told you that every time I see those posts, it reminds me like a little bit of about my husband, who's also from Minnesota. My entire in-laws are from Minnesota. So a lot of the characteristics that you build and around the LinkedIn presence reminds me a lot about that, which I really enjoy. And I'm thankful that you do that, because exactly what you said, that if you didn't pull those sides of you, then maybe it would be just such a blah from your end. You wouldn't enjoy it. You don't know if you can keep up, or not just sustainability from an environment standpoint, but
Mhm.
even able to sustain your LinkedIn journey. So I guess I'm thinking that where do you go from here? What are your, I hate calling what is your ultimate vision of life or business or whatever you're in, but do you have a set? Some people have goals and think like they have a certain strategy. And I'm not saying that I don't see it. I certainly see a theme coming out of your posts. Either it's
Mhm.
security, sustainability, or creators, or being how to be professional on LinkedIn,
Sure.
right? So I'm
So
curious where that is going.
So I don't think I'm certainly not at a point where I'm going to pivot any more than what I've done as far as starting to now drive home the point into the security industry a little bit more now that I've established some level of mainstream LinkedIn appeal as kind of social proof again that we were talking about. And then people
Hmm.
in this industry, it's like he was tanking 3 years ago, but now he's got some influence or he's figured it out a little bit and he's talking about our stuff. So I think that for me, the future is continuing to influence how we can take the best aspects of our industry because it's really purpose filled work, right? And like, how can we
Sure.
leverage that to generate interest? And I talk about this a lot, particularly around younger millennials as well as Zoomers, right? It's so every industry talks about we want top talent, we're going to get top talent and top talent. It's like, yeah, but you actually have to be interesting to do that. And so where that starts then is going to the places where these people are consuming their content. And it's not in an industry magazine article, particularly if we're looking to get some top performers from top schools in the country to come in and join our executive ranks and then be developed into like senior leaders and those types of things.
Mm.
They're consuming stuff on LinkedIn. If we're a bore fest, one, those types of posts are never going to get the type of engagement to where they get the distribution. You have to
Wow.
be a so you have to be
Mm.
a little bit creative so more people see stuff, so more people that you want to see your stuff can see your stuff. In a sense, what I did
Right.
is I knew that the people that they're, and not that I'm happy about anyone who sees my stuff, and I'm very proud of having kind of a diverse network on LinkedIn.
Right.
But I knew the security people in particular were going to just culturally, they were going to be a tougher nut to crack. So it's like, I'll start gaining interest in people that are a little bit more open to that. And I've got doctors, lawyers, professionals, entrepreneurs, creatives, all sorts of people inside of my network. And I'm very proud of that. And I was able to establish social proof through that network to where then this industry over here that's a little bit more resistant to those things are like, he actually did it, and he doesn't look like an idiot anymore, so maybe he's doing something right.
Something right. Yeah.
Right. So then they start connecting the dots, and I get the DMs, and I talk to people, and we talk about developing characters and storylines in the industry. And again, it's not just for my ego so that I can be the most famous person in the security industry. It's so that we can start getting messages out to the next generation of talented leaders in the organization or out in schools and maybe in other industries that would be interested in coming over because it really is purposeful work. And if you manage your career, you can make a good living in this industry. And there's a lot of diversity of the work. But if we're just posting a 1995 infomercial in LinkedIn post form, we can expect a 1995 QVC result. We're not going to get those people. So we have to be interesting. We have to develop characters that are interesting to the target talent that we want. And then we also have to develop engaging storylines that are relevant and beneficial to not only the industry, but also to our clients that aren't in the industry. Because a lot of industries on LinkedIn, and security is certainly no exception, they do a really good job about internal communications. I'm in the security industry and I like security stuff. And they post it. And yeah, some other security people like it, but it doesn't get broader reach. That's not our audience. We're just basically talking to each other. It's like, how do we reach our audience that isn't security people? And I use the joke sometimes. It's maybe I'm the guy that's a little bit too out there for the security industry and they know I'm out there, but it's like, what is this guy doing? But guess what? Here's the secret. To a lot of people that aren't in the security industry on LinkedIn, guess who their security person is in the network? It's not the guy doing white papers and having each other like their stuff. It's me.
Right.
I'm
They're
the
going to remember
security.
you as a top
Right.
of mind.
That's exactly right. So I become the security guy in a lot of non-security people's network. So then when you have those situations and they come up as well, it's I've got this thing where I need help with something and maybe it's you or maybe it's someone else in your network. And then the next thing I know a guy or I know a gal and they're in my network. And if I'm that person in a lot of people's network, that establishes my pipeline as well. So while some think that my efforts to communicate broadly outside of the network with mainstream content and interacting with mainstream content that has nothing to do with the core stuff within my industry, they might feel that it's a waste of time. I feel like I'm penetrating the buyer base that's not in the industry as opposed to just having the internal discussion.
That's You touched on something so important and brilliant at the end, which is you said something about diversifying talent and people, I always think of if somebody's posting a job rec, for example, they're almost like pointing out the finger to you and saying, what makes you different? Why should we choose you? What people don't realize is asking the same question to the employer, like, why should we work with you? the,
Mm,
there is a there is a responsibility on both sides. It's not just one side like, where I have to stand out and differentiate myself. You as an employer have to do the same. Why
right,
should people be coming and joining your team?
right.
What is so different about your team? How do you guys operate on a level that makes me feel that I belong there. So,
Interestingly enough, I
yeah.
posted about that this morning about the importance of not just putting the old great opportunity reshare post that 200 people see and no one applies to. I did one, it was quite some time back, but I did one where I posted a rec and I basically told a story about how great my team was, which they are, and I love them, right? And also about the amazing work that they're doing. Oh, and by the way, we have
Mhm.
this position open. If you're interested in these things, maybe apply.
Nice.
That posted over
Right.
5,000 views in a day, over 300 applications for a very niche role, and like over
Wow.
100 likes.
There you go.
That's not gonna happen resharing an employee. Here's a great opportunity. Why is it great? It's great because I had to say it's a great opportunity. Tell the story why it's great and generate some
Right.
interest and get people who are coming to your roles. Because the people who are able to start doing that and exude the true excitement and passion that's within that organization, they're going to win and they're going to get those people. Even if your processes are great and whatever, if you're too buttoned up that it's great opportunity, this role, this location, the end. It's like that's just in the sea along with everything else on Indeed at that point. And the other thing that's important too to remember, and you touched on this, and I think you appreciate this and you
Mhm.
understand it more than I do even, is we are in the age of entrepreneurship and solopreneurship. And I think a lot of companies are starting to appreciate a little bit more that where it used to be, we hire employees because we give them a place to do the work. We can bill the client for them that to do the work. We market our work and then we pay people for the work.
Mhm.
But we're in a studio right now doing this podcast, and you have a subscription, and people can easily get Square. They can set up a website. They can get Stripe. They can do their billing. They can do all of these things that makes a lot of that more accessible to solopreneurs and entrepreneurs to take care of all those functional things, generating an invoice, sending out a bill, making sure we get billed, scheduling a discovery call on Calendly. All those other things are relatively low cost, 15 bucks, 20 bucks there a month or whatever to get a small business infrastructure in place. And a lot of solopreneurs don't necessarily need those businesses the way that they used to for that core infrastructure because they can do that themselves. And then whether it's their advice or their product, that's their deliverable, but they're
Oh,
handling.
the barrier right now is just so low. Every day I'm reading stats around how many people are leaving jobs. It's not just the great resignation, it's the great breakup. You
Mhm.
call it like whatever the great is. And it's happening every single day. And so I think that the more we try to resist this whole idea of building character, whether it's online and offline, it's going to come back to us at some point because one thing that you said, and I want to make sure the listeners take away this really important key is this: what are we doing for the next generation? How are we
Mhm.
setting this up as a success for the next generation? If we can be the role models, if we can't model that, then we're disfavoring people who make your job title and everything to be as your identity, because
Right.
that identity can leave you when you are no longer part of that organization. So I think with like you said, the landscape is changing and we have to either embrace it or stay stagnant. And that's not a fun place to be either.
And the thing is, social media opened up so much on top of just the back end business infrastructure to do some of those basic things to run a business or a consultancy yourself. But then
Hmm.
on top of that, again, the levels of magnitude that you can market yourself now. I was at this conference a couple weeks ago and I purposely posted industry specific content over the course of this conference, these 3 or 4 days. And then I basically did an outline of what my engagement was and views by general audience as well as a specific security audience from the demographics day by day. And I think I actually overall I exceeded the attendance. I exceeded the attendance of the event, this global event in overall views. And then even within the security industry for my views, I converted it to it was probably a level of magnitude above if I had a Tyler Schmoker booth at this conference. And the thing is, my conference goes every year. So creators now have the infrastructure to reach a ton of people and advertise even without having a website. What's a LinkedIn premium subscription? It's like 240, $250 a year or something like that. It costs me 60 cents a day. I reach 5,000 people every day, someday more, some days more.
Wow. Yeah, and that's something, gosh, you can't even pay sometimes you can't even pay for advertisement and get that kind of reach.
Right.
So just think about that for a second. Okay, I have one last question, and I think we'll wrap up after that. But
Okay.
so far, it's been a smoking episode, Tyler.
I hope so.
What advice would you give to someone if, someone maybe, let's say in your security industry, if they wanted to get started and let's say they want, I know we always say, just be yourself. Don't worry about it. Just be yourself. What would you,
Just be consistent, just be authentic, and the crowd goes wild,
okay,
basically. No,
okay.
I'm
All
joking.
right.
I think that's the advice though. I think it was about a year ago, is just be consistent. It's every time I saw that, I just wanted to bang my head on the table.
Uh,
Consistently
I
what?
want to
An
have a
axe?
root canal. Just
Yeah,
kidding.
consistently an
Yeah.
axe murderer. The what is really important for this consistency, right? As well as authenticity. When you're talking about conservative industries,
Mhm.
content conservative, and content traditionals who are using LinkedIn more reactive, but they want to use LinkedIn proactively,
Mhm.
there's really a couple of options. You can start now, which they always say start now. I agree with that. It's just like savings for retirement. It's just like a 401. You start gaining
Okay.
that compounding network interest as soon as you start, right? And then manage it effectively. Take cues from some other industries. Don't just copy what the five of us are doing in our industry. And if you copy me, you're gonna probably look odd for a while, but I'll appreciate it. But and then it's a matter of speed and resiliency. I mean, if you're probably gonna be in it for the longer game or for a longer time before you start to see some real returns on your time and creative investment in a more conservative industry. You can either take that time, learn on your own, paint by numbers, and eventually maybe you'll scratch together a following, or there's always an opportunity to get a coach, and specifically like a coach who understands conservative industries. And I think that there's probably not even a security focused coach within the security industry. In the
Or
meantime,
they could hire you, Tyler.
that's the other part too. If you're really that committed to getting yourself out there and you want to know how to do it from a security perspective or framework, then I'm the guy who's out there normalizing being a little bit wild so you can come in behind with some stuff, still have some fun, and don't necessarily have to take the heat of being early extreme. I would say just be prepared to not blow up overnight. We all see in the feed the person that got here 6 months ago. Now they have 20, 30, 40, 50,000 connections and they've started a business and they're making $2 million a minute, working 5 hours a day. But the reality is for most of it's a longer grind and it's a longer game. I've been very fortunate in the amount of engagement that I've gotten and people being gracious with their time to not only take a moment to read my content, but then in some cases also be gracious enough to click the like button, leave some comments, reach out in the DMs, those types of things. But it takes a lot of time. And so you have to be prepared
Eh,
for that. But if you
yeah.
get there, the returns are huge. We have those opportunities then to have episodes like this, which takes a lot of work to get to a point where, all right, now
Right.
I'm on a podcast and we're shooting the breeze about this stuff, but eventually it can come.
Eventually it can come. And also, like you said, it builds character and storyline as you start to improve how to even tell your story. Right. And
Right.
I think this is where it, to me, is a great opportunity to take this as the whole experiment of LinkedIn as a learning moment, what you can get out of it. So I appreciate that deeply. I want to ask you, is there something you're working on that you want people to know about or you have coming up in the pipeline?
For right now, I'm going to stick to status quo. I'm always thinking about things and how I can apply some concepts and continue to add value to the industry.
Okay.
But for right now, stay tuned on LinkedIn. I think there'll be some fun stuff coming down the pipeline and feel free to reach out. And hopefully, if anything, you being gracious enough to have me on today and have this
Oh, it's my
conversation
pleasure.
for folks who are maybe a little bit on the fence. And so this guy who can't even capitalize, who would ever hire him and all this and that. So now that you've heard me speak, maybe we can have a conversation. Maybe we can collaborate and do some business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always say that do not, it's hard because like people judge you by the content. And when I actually talk to them, I'm like, wait a minute, your writing does not match with your voice at all. Who is
Right.
this person? This two totally different character. And so oftentimes I will take the time to schedule coffee chats and find out exactly what they're talking about or what they're doing. So you, my friend, by all means, you're exactly the reflection that we see on LinkedIn. So thank you so much. I appreciate you a ton, Tyler Rubin. Have a
Thanks,
good one.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to check out free resources and information on each episode where we share tips, strategies, and insights, you can find the show notes, downloads by visiting to my website, www.humairaakhtar.com. Again, if you find these episodes valuable, where it's adding meaning to your life and it's up-leveling your well-being and increase your self-awareness, please don't forget to leave a review for this podcast. Your ratings will also help other listeners to spread the word. Until then, please take care, and I will see you next time.